today I am talking about Thanksgiving, The Pilgrims First Years in America by Glenn Alan Cheney. And this is my first book I read off of my reading list for my Plymouth book challenge for 2020. So this book was nothing like I was expecting. I didn't know anything about it. I didn't even really read the back of it. Back of it is just reviews, actually. I thought it was all going to be all about Thanksgiving. Not necessarily just like Thanksgiving, the first Thanksgiving, but just like the history of Thanksgiving. Even though it says the Pilgrims First Year in America. I guess I should have thought about that a little more, maybe. So it's mostly basically the Pilgrims First Year in America and a little tiny bit about Thanksgiving. This was a kind of a surprise. I really enjoyed this book, actually. And it's easy, pleasant reading, so it was a good one to start off with, because some of the ones that I have on my list are older ones, which aren't going to be as easy to read. But there was like, he had some kind of like weird humor, weird style jokes in here, which I didn't really care for. His sense of humor that he splashed in. I mean, not that it was bad, it's not my sense of humor. Like, did you ever watch, like, I don't know if you have, but those, like, newsreels from, like, the 1940s, they show them on, like, Turner Classic Movies sometimes. It sounds like the humor in that. It's cheesy. But it's a good book. Like I said, and I learned a lot of things I didn't know. And the most surprising of all for me is that honeybees aren't native to North America. The Europeans brought the honeybees here, and the Pilgrims forgot to pack honeybees on the Mayflower, so it wasn't until the next ship came over that they had the honeybees to help them with their crops. Most of the crops in America, which I didn't realize this either, there's native pollinators, which I don't know too much about, just like birds and I guess other insects. It didn't really go into depth because that's not what this book is about. But it's a really interesting subject. I looked up a few articles. I'm definitely going to try and learn more about that. But so corn actually is pollinated by wind. So I mean, that's super interesting to me. Honeybee thing really shocked me. I found that very interesting. Can you imagine packing honeybees on a sailing ship from 1600? Oh my god, that sounds a little scary. But that's what they had to do. So I did mark down a few notes while I was reading, which a lot of them do not make any sense to me now. Because I just wrote one word. But another really surprising thing to me was on page 38, and it says that there's no drawings or designs in record of what the Mayflower looked like, so that's interesting considering the Mayflower too. I always thought it was like an exact replica, but they're kind of, I guess, going off of just a guess and like basis from other ships of the time period. That's something I definitely need to look up and read more about. That just really surprised me. It says historians can only conjecture the probable specifications of a 180-ton high-pooped, pot-bellied merchantman. No designs, drawings, or descriptions, not even descriptions of the Mayflower, have survived to modern times. So, I mean, even the insignia, the figurehead of the Mayflower, that Mayflower design, was that just like an artist came up with that in the 1950s, or is that known somehow? That's interesting too. I always thought that was, because it's such a, like an icon, such a symbol of Plymouth, that Mayflower insignia. But maybe that's just an original design from the 1950s. I'll have to try and find that out. Oh, okay. This is hilarious to me. Hold on. Page 106, if you're following along. Okay, so it's December right now, you know, around about the time the Pilgrims landed. I feel the pain. It says, the winter weather makes Plymouth a poor place to live, even in the best of shelters. Poor place in the winter. It's nice all the rest of the year, not so nice in the winter. And I actually was reading this book. It was, I finished this book like just after Thanksgiving. I read it like Thanksgiving week. I finished it that weekend following. And I was reading it down on the waterfront. It was either raining or snowing that day. I don't remember. It was extremely cold. It was like 30. Wind was like blowing, and I was sitting next to an open door for hours. So that really, really made this book very realistic to me. Talking about their first winter here. Not that a couple hours by an open door is anything in comparison, but it really added atmosphere. And then I have for page 127 marked down. I didn't bother to go back and see what. My note for page 127 is that the Billingtons were troublemakers. That's funny to me. We love the Billingtons. I'm not a descendant of the Billingtons, but you know, Billington C. I love the Billingtons. I love those troublemakers. So there was another thing in here that kind of surprised me because when you take a lot of the tours or read other writings, it always says that Dorothy Bradford probably committed suicide. They really like lean it towards her committing suicide from the deck of the Mayflower when it was anchored offshore during that first winter. And they talk about a lot about the conditions and just how depressed she probably was. But they don't know. So this really put that in perspective to me because I'd always just gone along with that idea. And I mean, it's a valid idea, but we don't know. It was winter and the deck of the ship could have been very icy and slippery, and she could have very easily fallen over, not being a person used to ships, and probably just exhausted as well from, you know, I'm sure, you know, they were depressed, but also exhausted. So she didn't necessarily commit suicide, and I don't think that's very fair to her to just assume that. So I don't think you should assume that. Just my thought on that. Another thing from this book that I'm pretty excited about is it mentions a book called Morts Relation. Morts Relation. Quite a few times. And I've heard the name of that before, but I never really knew what it was. And I'm really excited to read that book now. So that's getting added to the list. An account of the first year here, first person account of the first year here. They're not really sure which pilgrim wrote it. They have ideas, but they don't know for sure. But that sounds like it would be even more interesting than of Plymouth Plantation to me. I want to read Morts Relation. So that's on my reading list, and I have that on my Amazon list to get. And it's pretty cheap on Amazon. It's like $8 and something on Amazon. I don't know where else you could find it. You could probably find it for free somewhere. I don't know. I didn't really look hard yet. But that's on the to-read list now. Oh, okay. So, something else on page 118. I'd never heard this. Or if I'd heard this, it didn't, like, sink in very well. When they first got here and they were out exploring, it says, nearby they found the ruins of a fort, a palisade of planks put up by Christians, they were sure. Not far from there, they came out of the woods above two branches of the river that flowed around a high bank between. So yeah, so I guess Europeans were here before, like in Plymouth before, which I don't know if I realized they had built things here in Plymouth. And then on another, I didn't mark it, I don't know. It mentioned they found the grave of a man and a boy with European-style clothing, and they could see, like, blonde hair. Which I don't think I've ever heard that before. Like I said, if I'd heard it, it didn't stick in my head, but that seems like something really surprising. Who were these people? Why were they here? Like, what were they doing here before 1620? That's fascinating. A man and a young boy. Father and son. That's a mystery. Where can I learn more about that? I want to know more about that. what's being done to know more about that if we don't know more about that? I guess if we don't know more about that, we can't really find out much more about that, unfortunately. But I found that super interesting. Okay, so I remembered where the rest of my notes were. On Thanksgiving, well, not the rest, but a lot of my notes for this book. On Thanksgiving morning, I had, like, nothing to do. I was reading the book and, like, reviewing it or commenting on it as I went along on my Facebook page. I'm sure, like, everyone loved that. So I had this marked down. I was taking pictures of, like, pages and writing about them, because that's what I do sometimes with books. This is crazy. This is the craziest story. I have never heard this story. It's a good one. Okay, it's a paragraph. I'm going to read it to you. Samuel and Catherine Moore, and so they're talking about the passengers on the Mayflower, who went and who stayed behind. Samuel and Catherine Moore didn't go. Didn't even want to go. They had no religious issues to resolve, no need of a better life. They already had a pretty good life, at least in terms of stuff. Their problem was divorce, a particularly scandalous one. Some of their 4 children, maybe all of them, turned out to be hers, but quite possibly not his. This is like 20. The biological daddy may have lived right next door to relieve themselves of the problem and spare the children the embarrassment of bastardy? Bastard. Wouldn't it be bastardry? This is bastardy. Maybe it's bastardy. A bastardy. They gave all 4 of the separatists. They gave all 4 to the separatists and paid the children's one-way passage to a place from which they weren't likely to return. Ellen, 8, went with the family of Edward Winslow. Jasper, 7, went with the Carvers. Richard, 6, and Mary, 4, were handed over to the Brewsters. How horrible. Oh my god. That just is like the saddest. It's like a horrible, like, start of a Grimm's fairy tale. It's really sad. Poor kids. I can't even imagine that for them. They're going on this, like, ship to where it hasn't been colonized without their parents, and they're so young. I mean, there's, like, they have, oh my gosh. I can't even imagine that for them. That must have been horrible. And I think all but one of them ends up dying, but I'm not, I forget. That didn't stick. So it's really sad. Yep, so that was just interesting. I wanted to add that in. That was probably the most interesting thing from my posts on Thanksgiving Day when I was reading. Yeah. I think this would be a really good book to start with if you want to do, like, a Plymouth reading list for 2020. It's very easygoing, it's very light, but it's very informative. There's a lot in here. And even for someone living in Plymouth, there's things you'll read that you probably didn't know or, like, didn't stick. So it's a good one. And I really enjoyed it. So you should look for that one. Next up, I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't know what I'm in the mood for. I kind of really want to read that Morts Relation, but I don't have it yet, so I don't know. I'll let you know what the next one is. It's going to come soon. Start of January, probably. Okay, thanks for watching.